The United States and Iran have signalled that talks are progressing to end their conflict after a two-week escalation that saw daily tit-for-tat strikes. Iran's foreign ministry spokesman says discussions with Oman on reopening the Strait of Hormuz have been productive. An Omani delegation travelled to Tehran for talks on Friday. Meanwhile, the US ambassador to the United Nations says Donald Trump is giving talks with Iran, quote, some space.
As the president said, we are locked and loaded. Even more assets are going into theater, but he's giving talks some space. He's giving it a little bit of room. We've had both Oman and Iran and a number of our other negotiators engaged at every level, from the most senior levels all the way down to the technical level over the past few weeks, and particularly in the past few days.
His comments come after President Trump ordered a pause in the US assault on Iran that saw 13 consecutive nights of strikes. Tehran says it'll hold off on attacks as long as American forces do the same.
These attacks continued until 2 nights ago, but over the past 2 nights, the Americans have stopped their attacks. And as I said, since our strategy has essentially been retaliatory, we have also halted our retaliatory operations.
As talks continue, the Strait of Hormuz remains a flashpoint in the conflict. Iranian media say an oil tanker exploded after hitting a naval mine as it was passing through the waterway. The ship had reportedly left the route designated by Iran. Tehran has been demanding that all vessels transit through Iranian-controlled waters around Larak Island, north of the strait. It's rejected the southern route that goes along the Omani coast. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, has warned his country will respond to a Ukrainian attack on an Iranian vessel in the Caspian Sea. Tehran says one sailor was killed and another injured in what it called a Ukrainian strike on a commercial ship. Iran's accusing Kyiv of trying to expand a war beyond its borders, but Ukraine says it was targeting Russian vessels carrying Iranian-linked military cargo. In an online post, Araghchi called the attack a blatant UN Charter violation done at Israel's behest to drag Europe into its war. In calls with the EU's Kaja Kallas and Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, he said he made clear that what the freeloader in Kyiv did cannot go unanswered. Al Jazeera's Russell Soda is following all the latest developments from Tehran.
Iranian officials are confirming that an oil tanker attempting to pass through the Strait of Hormuz exploded after hitting naval mines. According to the Iranian officials, the reason that the explosion has occurred was because this ship was not following the designated lanes by Iranian authorities. And now Iranian authorities are warning that any ship that attempts to pass through the strait needs to be in full coordination, otherwise Iran cannot guarantee the safety of that ships. So this is coming after 2 days of calm. In the last 2 days, we have seen no attacks on Iran and no response from Iran. And this incident has happened just hours after the Iranian Foreign Minister, Ismail Bakai, said there has been progress in diplomatic engagement. The Omani delegation was in Tehran. They exchanged ideas about how to create a mechanism for the future management of the Strait of Hormuz. But what we see, there is no radical change in Iran's position regarding the Strait of Hormuz. Still, Iran opposes the alternative corridors through the strait. And also, according to some of their reports, Omanis have suggested a regional consortium and also this mechanism to be managed by this regional consortium without tolls to be taken. But what we are hearing is that Iranians are still insisting on a sort of fees, and they're calling it the service fee, and also they want this mechanism to be managed by Iran. While that is happening, another important development was Ukrainian attack on an Iranian ship. Now, for the second time, Iranian Foreign Ministry saying that this Ukrainian attack is not going to go unanswered. So the question is whether Iran is going to retaliate or not. So the experts here are saying that technically that is possible because the distance between Tehran and Kyiv is less than 2,000 kilometers, and that is within the range of Iranian missiles and drones. Rasul Sardar, Al Jazeera, Tehran.
Joining us now is Stephen Zunas, the founding chair of Middle Eastern Studies at the University of San Francisco. Stephen, thank you for your time. There's no ceasefire, but there's some murmurings That messages are being exchanged, that talks are being held. How much weight do you give these vagaries?
Well, at least the fighting has stopped for now, and that's certainly a good thing. Though the two sides are very far apart. Even the memorandum of understanding left so many issues to be determined, and that ended up being actually an incentive for both sides to try to jockey for positions by engaging in provocative acts. And it's positive, of course, that Trump did not go ahead with the escalation that he apparently had been planning. He was told by his advisors that not only would it not achieve its strategic objectives, but Iran's retaliatory capabilities were strong. I mean, these Iranian drones, they're very simple to make, technologically not that sophisticated, cost between $20,000 and $40,000. But the U.S. interceptors, like the Patriots, they cost like $4 million, and they're much more complex, and the U.S. is running out of them. So the U.S. recognized that even though the U.S. could do more damage on one level, the Iranians could still retaliate in some ways that would hurt U.S. Strategic interests, of course, those of America's Gulf allies as well. So basically, with the failure of the military option to advance things, Trump figures, hey, we might as well try negotiations.
Yeah, and it seems that others within the Trump administration, or at least his party, recognise this as well. The US ambassador to the UN is saying that the talks are being given some space. And the Speaker, Mike Johnson, says we've got to wrap it up. What do public comments like that tell us about the way the administration is handling the conflict at the present moment?
Well, it's a very unpopular war. In fact, this is the first war in modern American history where the majority of Americans opposed it from the beginning. I mean, usually when the U.S. gets involved in a war, even a controversial one like Iraq, people will say, we should support our troops, and now that we're there fighting, et cetera. But not here. Most Americans thought it was a very bad idea from the get-go, and opposition has been growing, especially as the economic impact is hitting people. Americans are much more dependent on their automobiles than in most countries, and the petrol prices have been going up and up. And so it makes it, so there's political pressure, particularly with the midterm elections coming up, and some of the Republicans in Congress are getting nervous.
Yeah. Can I ask you, does the existence of this MOU text, the fact that there has been an agreement that was ostensibly signed and agreed and published, does that now make it harder to actually return to the negotiating table? I mean, they're very aware of what the other will or won't commit to. I know the wording was broad. But they've also revealed how they'll react to any misinterpretations that they perceive.
Well, certainly the distrust is even higher now, and the failure for it to address the more complex issues, I think, led an opening for each side to try to take advantage. I mean, this is very different than the 2015 nuclear agreement, which was very, very detailed, left no room for ambiguity, but at the same time, if you can't have something that's too detailed as long as the two sides are apart. So this is going to be a very long, complicated process. I wouldn't be surprised if we fell back into a shooting war again, and then maybe going back to negotiation, then back to a shooting war. I mean, this could go on for many, many months.
I was going to ask if you thought actually perhaps that previous agreement might be useful to refer to in any way. It sounds like you don't.
Well, I mean, I think it's worth another try, certainly, and it's the closest they've come so far. So I think it could be revived in some form, perhaps tweaking around the edges. But I do think that despite the growing distrust and the breakdown, the different interpretations, it does show that both sides can at least make some progress. And since there isn't a good military option, that seems to be the most logical thing to fall back on.
Stephen Zunis joining us from San Francisco. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Renewed tensions in the region have pushed up oil prices again, but there are several benchmarks, and the difference in price comes down to when the oil is bought and when it's delivered. The spot price for crude delivered immediately is about $96 a barrel. That reflects what buyers are willing to pay today. A futures contract is an agreement to buy or sell oil at a set price on a future date. Right now, Brent crude futures are trading about $7 below the spot price. That's because futures reflect expectations about supply and demand, along with the cost of storing and financing oil. This chart from the US Energy Information Administration shows how oil futures trading has surged since 2000. These days, futures are primarily financial instruments traded on exchanges, and only a small fraction actually result in the delivery of oil. Hopefully helping break this all down for us now, joining us from Houston in Texas is Ed Hers. He's an energy economist and a lecturer at the University of Houston. Ed, thank you for your time. Help me understand this like I'm five then. Why hasn't the price of oil gone back up again now that the ceasefire is over?
Well, it has gone back. Keep in mind, WTI, which is a primary benchmark in the global oil market, the West Texas Intermediate price, is also one that feeds into the Brent price. Brent oil itself is an index. Brent, as a producing region, is no longer an exporting region. It's an importing region in the North Sea. And so any barrel of oil that gets to the North Sea or the Brent market has to be produced someplace else and then delivered. And as you point out, there are a lot of financial players now. Hedge funds are involved, private equity funds, sovereign wealth funds. And so the United States Treasury is trading in the futures market along with the members of OPEC. So the disparity or difference between the futures price, for example, in the United States, the September contract just began trading a couple of days ago, or became the front month as August expired. That's for delivery in September, and so we're looking ahead, a number of weeks. And oil futures contracts extend out 20 years, and so. The spot market is, to borrow a phrase from years ago, where the rubber meets the road. And we can see a big difference in the United States with the crack spread. In other words, what is the difference between the purchase price of a barrel of oil and the refined price of gasoline or diesel? And so while oil, WTI is approximately $89, $90 a barrel, diesel closed out the week at $183 a barrel. Gasoline closed out the week at about $145 a barrel. And if conflict continues to expand, we could very well see the futures price and the spot price meet up at approximately $200 a barrel.
Oof, I don't know that many people would want to hear that, Ed. Can you help me understand then the conflict in this region? It's obviously having an effect on the price of oil, but are there other elements or aspects that are also influencing the price at this very moment?
Well, yes. I mean, first of all, the conflict between Ukraine and Russia has had an impact. But going back to a pre-war discussion, if you will, 106 million barrels a day was effectively the global market at the end of 2025. Since then, about 10 million barrels a day has come off of the market because of essentially a partial blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. China has cut its imports by approximately 5 million barrels a day. The International Energy Agency, including the United States, has been releasing about 2.5 million barrels a day into the global market from the strategic reserves. And Kazakhstan, Venezuela, others have added about 500,000 barrels. So the net effect is the global market short maybe 2 million barrels a day. And that according to, as an economist, the elasticity of demand would lead to a price increase of about 50%, roughly where we've been in the last 8 weeks. The releases from the strategic reserves only have about another 40 days to go at the current rates. We don't know how long China can go, having depressed its own imports by 5 million barrels a day. It's looking like if peace does not happen, if the strait is not reopened, and frankly, if it's reopened and there's more extensive damage to oil-producing facilities that Iran has been attacking across the Gulf, then we're going to see a higher price of crude oil extend throughout the rest of the year, and certainly in the United States through the midterm elections.
Yeah, you mentioned China there. Can we talk about how this is impacting the rest of the world. And I'm wondering if we can focus a little bit. I've heard about this concept of demand decimation and whether you think there is a reality to that the longer this goes on, although we know that huge parts of Asia are also very reliant still on oil products, particularly from the Middle East.
Exactly. And you know, frankly, ExxonMobil chartered tankers to start shipping refined products to Southeastern Asian countries in the second week of the conflict. The United States has run down commercial inventories to provide gasoline, diesel, jet fuel across the globe. The releases from the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve earmarked to be 172 million barrels. Almost 100% of that has gone to other markets, not used domestically by the U.S. So you know, continuing the conflict, we'll see the price increase. And it's not so much demand destruction, which is a term I'm really uncomfortable with and don't consider to be a useful term. It's conservation efforts, it's switching, it's the ability of the consumers to find another approach, carpooling. As the price goes up, naturally all consumers tend to be more economizing in what they do.
Ed, thank you very much for your time and your insight. I appreciate it. Ed Hurst joining us from the University of Houston. Let's take a look at another conflict, one that's raging between Ukraine and Russia. Moscow has launched more than 130 drones at Ukraine, killing at least 4 people, including a child. The strikes hit the Ukrainian cities of Zaporizhia, Kharkiv and Chernihiv, injuring dozens. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is accusing Russia of deliberately striking civilian areas. Meanwhile, the city of Kryvyi in central Ukraine also came under Russian fire. A shopping centre was hit in the latest drone attack, sending thick clouds of smoke rising into the sky. Local authorities say 2 elderly women were injured in the attack and were treated at the scene. The front line between Ukrainian and Russian forces in eastern Ukraine has changed little, with both sides largely holding their positions. But the conflict has intensified beyond the battlefield, extending into the Sea of Azov and Black Sea. Ukraine has been stepping up strikes on Russia's energy and civilian infrastructure, targeting oil refineries, fuel depots, warehouses, and Moscow's so-called shadow fleet. Russia's responded by attacking Ukraine's Black Sea shipping corridor during the peak harvest season. It's also targeted agricultural facilities and port infrastructure in Odessa, through which most of Ukraine's grain exports pass. The attacks have pushed global wheat prices to their highest level in 2 years. Well, joining us now to discuss this further is Maximilian Hess, who's a fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute and a founder of Enmenta Advisory, which is a political risk and international relations consultancy firm. He joins us from London. Mr. Hess, thank you for your time. Has this become a war of hurting each other, but less about the front lines?
That's a good way to put it, and Anna, thank you so much for having me. Yes, I think what's really important to consider in this war is that there's essentially 3 front lines. There's the front lines on the battlefield itself in southeastern Ukraine primarily. There is then the long-range front line, the use of both sides to try to damage each other's economy and raise pain and increase costs on the war, which is even more important these days than the long-distance strikes on logistical hubs and the like, although, of course, there's a broad overlap between the 2 of them. And then the third is on the sanctions front, where we continue to see moves by the European Union, for example, in its latest package just this week, but nothing that is meaningfully going to shift the dial. So both sides are really focused right now on innovating on these long-range strikes, hoping that they can gain some kind of advantage there.
Yeah, what do you make of the conflict now appearing to shift oceanward? We've seen incidents in the Caspian, we've seen incidents in the Azov, we've seen incidents in the Black Sea.
Well, tragically, Russia has been carrying out strikes in the Black Sea in one way or another for 12 years now, since it first occupied Crimea, and then in major ways targeting the Ukrainian ports all the way back in 2022, where although Putin never claimed that he wanted to annex Odessa and the other Black Sea coastal cities in the southwest, explicitly they did move and occupy Kherson, ultimately were pushed out of there and go and seek to disrupt the shipping there throughout. Ukraine has adapted over the years, both in terms of its securities for those ports, but also in terms of using land routes to shift out more exports. The real strategic shift here has been Ukraine's own success in its long-range drone strikes, hitting in the last month a record number of Russian Shadow Fleet tankers, but also some Russian grain tankers of its own, some of which, of course, carries grain looted from occupied Ukrainian territory. It's worth bearing in mind. But so Russia often in response tragically targets civilian hubs and of course targets Ukraine's own grain exports in response.
Yeah, can we talk about the civilian toll here? Ukraine is accusing Russia of deliberately targeting civilian areas. Is that an allegation that could also be levelled at Kyiv?
I think there's a lot of extensive evidence of Russia's willingness to target Ukrainian civilians over the years. We saw just this week as well, tragically, the first strike that appeared to target directly the metro stations in Kyiv that are used as bomb shelters during the war. Ukraine's expansion of its drone strikes has included a number of attacks on facilities owned by a company called Wildberries, kind of a Russian version of Amazon, its distribution centers. There have been civilian casualties there. Kyiv, of course, argues that this is because those distribution centers are also used for the war, and that much has been made clear through open source reporting and through that company's own embrace operating pages saying buy goods here to send to the front lines. But tragically, yes, civilians have been caught up there. Civilians also were caught up in Ukraine's nearly 2-year-old now excursion into Russian territory across the border in the north, although they have since been repelled from there. So yes, Russian civilians have also increasingly been caught in the front lines, but we certainly don't have the kind of evidence of strikes like Russia has carried out with missile strikes on bomb shelters, on shopping malls while they're open, and on other key civilian infrastructure.
Yeah, it's the nuance, isn't it? The scale of the intent. Can we talk about the Caspian Sea again? Forgive me for bouncing backwards and forwards here, but Iran is accusing Ukraine of Russia attacking, Iran is accusing Ukraine of attacking either a Russian ship, or if you believe Iran, it was an Iranian ship, and there are accusations of it going backwards and forwards about what the cargo was. Is there a feeling that even if it is not in reality, perhaps it is in appearance or in a messaging at least, that these are conflicts that are starting to bleed into each other somewhat?
I definitely think these conflicts are starting to bleed into each other. You know, Kyiv has said that they have targeted shipping on the Caspian Sea. President Volodymyr Zelensky made that declaration just earlier today, I believe, for the first time. The known routes to share Russian cargo and to share both Iranian drones in the past going into Russia to be used to target Ukraine. It was Iranian innovation that led to the Shahed, known in Russian as Geran, drones that have been such a key role in targeting Ukraine. So Kyiv sees this as sort of pushback for that, also showing its value as a security partner for Europe and the United States. But Kyiv also is playing a key role in drone defenses for Middle Eastern countries themselves. We've seen it sign nearly a dozen such agreements across the region. This week, also the first big agreement with the United States. So Ukraine knows that, to use Donald Trump's terms about holding the cards, it now holds the card of not only its own drone strike expertise, but drone defense expertise. And that's very much in demand, both in the Gulf region and particularly from the United States these days as well.
Maximilian Hess joining us from London. Thank you.